Today, we're joined by Congresswoman Sarah McBride, a member of the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, a fierce advocate for equity, and the first openly transgender member of Congress. But if you think this interview is about identity politics, you're missing the point. This is about how we govern. When the institutions around us are failing, that's right, I said it, they're failing. How we lead the room that is not made for us. And how we push forward when the loudest voices in the chamber are the most interested or more interested in theater than in truth. Because make no mistake, America is in a moment of institutional freefall, and we get a front row seat to the whole thing. Yesterday, ladies and gentlemen, the Dow dropped more than 800 points this week. The US dollar slipped to its lowest value in 3 years. Global investors, who once saw the American markets as the safest bet on earth, are now stepping back. Not because of inflation, not because of war, but because the President of the United States is reportedly threatening the independence of the Federal Reserve. Let me say that again. The White House is applying political pressure to the one institution that was designed by law and by logic to remain independent. We're not watching a financial correction. We're watching the erosion of credibility in real time. And here's the irony. In a time when the country seems to be in a state of emergency economically, institutionally, and even morally, identity is still at the front and center of the political crosshairs. Instead of focusing on infrastructure or healthcare or economic recovery, too many are weaponizing identity for applause lines and campaign donations. Congresswoman McBride isn't here for applause. She's here for answers, and so are we. This is the agenda. Let's get started. Congresswoman McBride, welcome back to the agenda.
It's great to be back.
I talked to Senator Coons a few weeks ago, talking to you, and the applause is you all, when no one knew the agenda, were brave enough to come on, and not only come on, but come back repeatedly. I think we're on the 5th or 6th time.
Something like that. I remember the first time we met, we were outdoors in masks, I think.
Absolutely.
Height of COVID.
Absolutely. And we had one cameraman and one mic, and it was wobbling. It was just wobbling. So I'm glad that we've improved.
We've come a long way.
We've come a long way. You're now a congresswoman, and we are trying to better the world in our own special way, and definitely better the state of Delaware and the United States in the same time. But it's been a busy 100 days for you. It has been history making. I think that's fair. And so much is going on, and it's hard to know where to begin. Yeah. It's really hard to know where to begin. Do you feel that way? Like when you walk down the hallways of Congress and you're dealing with all these things, are you like, this is the craziest time in which we're living in? And this is what Delawareans, I think, really want to know.
Well, I think anyone who watches the news knows that Congress is crazy. And it is obviously a significant moment for our country, an inflection point. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's hyperbole to say that. I mean, one of the most important inflection points in our country's history. While too many in Congress are consumed with attention on social media and grabbing headlines for headlines' sake, despite the performance art and the chaos, the cruelty, the corruption in some instances we're seeing in Washington, D.C., despite all of that, it is first and foremost a privilege to serve there. It's one of the reasons why I'm so outraged by a lot of what I see, because so many people don't treat it like the responsibility that it is. It is a privilege to represent Delaware. And obviously, when I ran for office, when I ran for this seat, I said I would be willing to work with anyone who was willing to work with me to help Delaware, but I would stand up to anyone who I believed was hurting Delaware and Delawareans. And this first 100 days for me has been a dual story. of defending Delaware, but also still having to deliver for Delawareans and doing so at the same time.
And defending yourself.
Well,
I know you don't like to dwell.
yeah. I mean, I'll say on that, I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit, but that doesn't distract me. I'm not there to talk about myself. I'm there to defend Delaware. And so that means sounding the alarm and pushing back on this administration's actions that are trying to harm my constituents, from the nearly $10 million that they've stolen from Delaware farmers, that they're withholding from farmers illegally, to the tens of millions of dollars that they've cut off from public health officials here in Delaware to stop the spread of infectious diseases, to the nearly 1 million meals that they are withholding from the food bank of Delaware, keeping Delaware families hungry in this moment, to, of course, their heartless budget that would result in the largest cut in Medicaid in American history, which I have time and time again voted against and mobilized against, to more recently, the administration cutting off millions of dollars in funding for manufacturing jobs in this state, something that I led my colleagues on, demanded the administration reverse, and they did, saving hundreds of jobs in this state, $75 million in economic activity. And that is obviously a big focus, defending Delaware in this moment. But people also need their members of Congress to deliver for them. Even in these chaotic, uncertain, and frightening times, we still have to deliver for people. And so in this first 100 days, I've worked with Democrats and Republicans on legislation that provides consumers with protection against predatory practices by so-called credit repair organizations. I've introduced legislation that is bipartisan that'll help to combat the spread of avian flu, to protect our farmers and ultimately lower the costs of groceries for Delawareans at the grocery store. I've signed on to 120 bills, 75 of which are bipartisan. And our constituent advocate team continues to be a lifeline for Delawareans, working with hundreds over the last 100 days in moments of need, and through that work, returning $360,000 to Delawareans in the form of veterans benefits, Social Security checks, tax refunds that Delawareans were owed and the federal government wasn't delivering. So there's a lot of work, but this job, especially in this moment, requires us to walk and chew gum at the same time. It requires us to defend Delaware and to deliver for Delawareans.
It does. And I know you're going to say, Kerwin, what do you mean by this? But do you think that the Democratic Party is weak right now? So all these things are going on, and you told us the great points, but there's a lot of bad points that are happening within our government as well.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like the Democratic Party really has the horsepower to deal with some of these issues. Am I wrong?
I think that, look, I'm not going to BS you. The Democratic Party's not in a great place after the last election, right? We don't have the White House. We don't have the Senate. We don't have the House.
Right.
I mean, that's undeniably not good. I think the party is in a moment where it is having to very quickly figure out what is the best way to fight hard and fight smart in this moment. I think that, one, because of the way our government works, we don't have a singular leader of the opposition. Right? Until we have a presidential nominee, there will not be a singular leader of the Democratic Party. And that results in a diversity of messages, a diversity of tactics, a diversity of strategies. And I know there's a lot of frustration in that, but I would posit that that's actually a good thing for us in this moment, because we have to win people back. We have to keep our own side energized, motivated, and hopeful. And the work that some of my colleagues are doing on the Fight Oligarchy tour, I think is important to energize our own side to keep up the fight. But the reality is, we have to build our coalition broader if we are going to not only throw sands in the gears of this administration's authoritarian machine, but also win enough people to win elections back. We can't just be a party of protest. We also have to be a party of power. And that means building our coalition. It means getting voters who maybe voted for this president in the last election to recognize as quickly as possible that he has broken his promises to them time and time again in just 100 days, so that we can not only have the public on our side, but a governing majority that we can elect in the House in 2026 and ultimately in the Senate and the White House in 2028.
Do you think the economy is the best thing to bring those voters back over to, well, not over, but to win them to the Democratic Party in the state of our economy right now? Do you think that's affecting people from, the Bible Belt, the Appalachians, all the way out west, all those places that were glowing red? Most of them have to be affected by this economy right now at a place where it's just unprecedented.
That has to be the focus. That has to be the focus of our actions and our message in this moment. That doesn't mean we throw vulnerable people under the bus. That doesn't mean that we shy away from every fight, especially when red lines are met, when people are being thrown to foreign gulags without any due process. We've got to stay true to our values. We've got to make sure that we are defending vulnerable people and the rule of law in this moment. But we have to keep the main thing the main thing. And the main thing for voters across this country is the economy. Before Donald Trump was elected, the area of policy that he was the strongest on was economic policy among voters, their perception of him. Now it's his weakest area. It's his Achilles heel in this moment. He was elected. For all of the commercials and all of the chattering class conversations, he was elected at the end of the day to lower costs. He was elected because people believed that he would manage this economy better. But we're seeing the exact opposite. Every single one of his policies thus far, every single one of his major policies thus far, has made our economy weaker.
And it doesn't and it happens
cost.
So quickly. His lack of confidence that is being displayed by the powers that be, it affects the people like within a week. It seems like the decisions that he makes, the roll off of the bad decisions that he makes, quickly affects the American people.
A president can't single-handedly save our economy, but we are seeing in real time that a president can single-handedly drive it into a ditch.
I love that.
And what we have seen over the last couple of weeks in particular, a reckless, careless, chaotic tariff policy that has thrown our own markets into chaos, that has thrown our alliances
the Delaware poultry market,
that has thrown almost every industry in this country into uncertainty and chaos, pulling them back from investing in jobs and infrastructure, in their goods and their products and innovation because of the chaos and the uncertainty that this president's policies are creating. The 401ks, the retirement accounts have been devastated.
I can't.
Fortunately for you, Kerwin, you've got some time before you retire. But for someone who's either retired or about to retire, the complete self-own, the self-imposed market crash that is the byproduct of one man, one unstable person.
Is that what he's seen as? I mean, really, do you all sit around the coffee machine in the Capitol like, good God, he's nuts.
Yes. And you know what, I got to tell you, some Republicans whisper that too.
I'm sure they do.
And that's disheartening because they know, they see the harm that's happening. And they are too afraid to speak out and push back. But here's the thing, and this goes to what we were talking about before. Those folks some of them represent swing districts, some of them represent redder districts. We need them to be more scared that they will lose the next election because they stand with this president, compared to fearing that they'll lose it because they stand up to him. And the only way we do that is to shift public opinion, and the only way we can shift public opinion is to get people on our side who aren't already on our side. Sometimes as Democrats, we fight fights that feel viscerally comforting to us in a way that feels viscerally comforting to us.
And we've been fighting the same fight for a very long time where we developed a soundtrack.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Let's focus on the issues that the voters who we need to get are telling us is the main issue. And it's the issue that Donald Trump every single day is putting on full display his incompetence in, and that's the economy. Costs are increasing because of this administration. Farmers in southern Delaware are struggling because of the decisions of this president. Educators, healthcare providers, everyone is worried right now that they will not be able to better help the people they serve because of this administration. The Food Bank of Delaware doesn't have 1 million meals.
Right.
Because this administration decided to cut off food to hungry people. When I was in the Delaware State Senate, there was nothing that was more bipartisan than support for the Food Bank of Delaware.
Mm-hmm.
When they go after for people's 401ks,
it's a guardrail. It's a guardrail for hungry citizens.
When they go after food for hungry people, when they go after Medicaid, which 1 in 4 Delawareans rely on for health coverage, they're touching a third rail. And we need the public to understand the very real harm that this administration is inflicting on real people before that harm gets to them, so that we have the majority of this country alongside us, pushing back and ultimately turning out to vote so that we can pull the emergency brake on this chaos and this corruption.
So you're on the Foreign Affairs Committee, correct? Mm-hmm. And I know some of that is sensitive data, but what is the pulse of our foreign allies right now? What are they saying about all this? What has gotten back to you?
That the United States is destroying its own capacity to lead the world diplomatically, foreign policy-wise, and most importantly, economically. Because this administration, look, do we need to make sure that we have better trade deals for our workers and our industries? Absolutely. Do we need to make sure that our allies are stepping up and doing more for their own security and not just relying on the United States? Yes. There are legitimate goals that Democrats and Republicans can unite on to make sure that the United States continues to lead, but leads in a smart, fair, and more equitable way. Mm-hmm. But whatever capital the United States has in the world that we could be leveraging a little bit better and smarter, that is being destroyed by this administration. Because what's happening is this America alone, rather than America first strategy, is driving not only allies, but also that great middle. Mm-hmm. The countries who are developing, who aren't firmly in one camp or the other. It's driving those countries into the arms of China or Russia.
Yes, it is.
It's creating the chaos.
Because they have no other choice.
The chaos, the bullying, the revocation of humanitarian and diplomatic support for other countries, including our allies, it creates a vacuum. And China and Russia fill that vacuum because in many cases these countries don't have another choice, or because they are so fed up with an administration that seems to be guided by the sole principle that might makes right. That we get to say and do whatever we want, regardless of how it impacts anyone else. And that might be something you can get away with for a couple of weeks or a couple months, but it's not a sustainable leadership model. And it's one that is causing not only very real harm now, but will require our country to have to regain the trust of the rest of the world over the course of decades. And in that time, it will only further allow China and Russia to fill the vacuum. We benefit from being the global leader. We benefit from being in partnership with Europe. We benefit from being in collaboration with African nations. We benefit from being in trading partnerships with Eastern Asian nations. We benefit when the world looks to us morally, economically, and militarily, because that also means that our interests are paramount and prioritized in those global conversations. And right now, because of this administration, we're going to see a world where China and Russia become the global leaders rather than the United States, and that is
there recovery
dangerous.
Though? How hard do you think recovery will be? I'm going to tell you where I'm coming from in this. I still believe in the United States of America. And I do believe that we're going to get better and we're going to get through this.
Me too.
I really do, Sarah.
I do too.
I think that democracy is something that has to continue, and it gets to a point where the powers that be will say, this isn't it, and we need to make a change. And sometimes those changes are abrupt, but they do happen. And when they do happen, and I am confident that they will, I have to be, how hard is it going to be, just guesstimate, because we haven't been here before, recovery?
Look, I think that I agree with you. I remain hopeful because I think you cannot tell me that the reasons for hopelessness now are greater than the reasons for hopelessness for an unemployed worker during the early days of the Great Depression. You cannot tell me that the reasons for hopelessness now are greater than the reasons for hopelessness for an enslaved person in the 1850s. We have had seemingly impossible odds that we have overcome as a nation and come out stronger as a nation in overcoming it. I believe that this moment can be that slingshot moment where, yes, we are pulled backward, but the pressure and tension of being pulled backward propels us to destinations that we've not yet been. And the longer this administration remains unchecked, the more harm they can do. And to your point, overcoming that harm, both the immediate tangible harm, the people who go hungry, the people who lose care, in some cases, the consequences will be irreversible for folks. In other cases, we can reverse those policies, restore funding, restore support, restore programs, and start helping people again once we have power. But then there are other things that are a result of this breach of trust that will take years to repair. Because, back when in the first administration, foreign policy is a good example. Back in the first administration, Donald Trump was pursuing policies that were alienating our allies. And then Joe Biden got elected and he did a worldwide tour. America is back. And in that moment, I think foreign leaders could go, okay, America is back. That was an aberration. But we're on Trump too. This isn't an aberration. And we are going to have to prove administration after administration to allies, to other countries around the world that America is indeed back and back permanently. That we're not going to keep swinging back and forth between an approach to foreign policy that values human rights and diplomacy and our alliances and democracy to a foreign policy that prioritizes personal enrichment, amorality, illiberalism, and authoritarianism. It's going to take multiple presidential administrations to prove
to fix
that we're not going to be swinging back and forth.
And I think we need to be real conscious of who we put out there to win.
Yeah.
I know that your voice is heard in the Democratic Party, and I would really like them to know that we have to put a candidate out there that is going to win. I make no bones about it. People understand what party I'm affiliated with, but at the same time, although I am optimistic, I'm reserved, and I'm nervous.
We can be hopeful and realistic. We can be principled and pragmatic at the same time.
Yeah. So your first 100 days went well. Let Delawareans know about your next 100.
So over the next 100 days, I will continue to, frankly, do what I've done over the first 100 days, which is to work my heart out to defend Delaware and to deliver for Delawareans at the same time. I'll continue to introduce more legislation in Congress that protects Delawareans, that lowers the cost of living, that improves pay and benefits for Delaware workers. I'll be introducing those bills over the coming weeks. I hope that those bills, just as my first couple of bills were, will be bipartisan. I'll continue to sound the alarm on this administration's illegal and harmful actions to make sure that we're building the public opposition. And of course, my main focus over the next 100 days is to defend Medicaid.
Please.
Because we're on a 2-week break right now, but the last week that I was on the House floor 2 weeks ago, I was there with every single one of my Democratic colleagues voting against the next step in this heartless Republican budget that would result in, at minimum, an $880 billion cut, the largest cut in American history of Medicaid, which, as I mentioned, provides coverage for cancer treatment, new moms, seniors, and people living with disabilities in assisted living facilities, health coverage for more than 200,000 Delawareans, including more than 40% of kids in the state. This administration wants to slash and gut that program. And I will continue to not only vote against any cuts to Medicaid, but make sure that the public understands what Donald Trump and Mike Johnson are trying to do, because they are trying to decimate healthcare coverage, food assistance for some of the most vulnerable people in our state and our country, all to only partially pay for tax cuts for Donald Trump's wealthy billionaire friends, all while exploding the deficit as a party that has consistently clutched their pearls about the deficit. This budget is in sole support of one group of people, the wealthy in this country, at the expense of everyone else.
At everyone else. And people, I think for some that aren't affected, they don't understand. They think Medicaid is for poor people or people that aren't working or whatever. It affects so many Americans, and especially those with disabilities and those children with disabilities, catastrophic disabilities.
Yes.
And they don't understand it because it's been painted poorly to them.
It is, first off, there are so many people who are working, who have Medicaid. But there are also people who can't work who need Medicaid, whether it's a person with a disability or a family member of a person with disability whose full-time job is caring for their child with disabilities. They can't work outside the home. They can't work outside of that role. They need health coverage too. And so they might not be working in a traditional job that gives them health benefits, but they're working their ass off to make sure that their kid gets the support that they need. Medicaid helps them too. Medicaid helps a 12-year-old who's living in poverty. Yes, who's living in poverty? But a 12-year-old who has cancer. I don't care what your plight is in life. If we can protect your health and well-being with a police force, if we can protect your health and well-being with a military, then we can protect your health and well-being by guaranteeing that every single person in this nation has access to quality, affordable health care. We've got a complicated hybrid system in this country, and that's likely what we will always have. Medicaid is a critical part. And I got to tell you, if they cut Medicaid, it's not only going to result in worse coverage or no coverage for the people who currently rely on Medicaid, it's going to increase costs for all of us. Because if they are not reimbursing nurses and doctors what they deserve because they slash Medicaid and lower reimbursement rates, who do you think pays for that drop? Everyone else.
Absolutely.
If a patient loses health coverage or sees their coverage less holistic because of a massive cut, what happens? That patient doesn't get the preventative care that they need. They end up going to the emergency room when their condition is worse, and that increases healthcare costs for all of us. And so this is a policy and a proposal that is heartless for the 1 in 4 Americans that rely on Medicaid for coverage, but it is also harmful to all of us premium payers who want to see the cost of healthcare go down rather than up. And slashing Medicaid, pulling that leg out of the stool of our healthcare system, would have the exact opposite consequence. It would increase costs for all of us.
We've talked about the government. We didn't get into defense and why our defense secretary can't figure out how to use a skiff or the red phone. I haven't figured that out yet.
Dear Lord.
We've talked about Medicaid. We've talked about your first 100 days in office, your next 100 days in office, and the expectations and the promises that you've made. One thing we haven't talked about, and I don't think that we need to, is this gender conversation.
Yeah.
I honestly don't give a damn.
Well, and that's the thing. I don't think Delawareans care what bathroom any other person uses.
We're on fire. I don't care what my firemen.
They don't want debates about pronouns in Congress. They want Congress to focus on serious issues, be serious people, and tackle the serious problems that this nation has. And there are a handful of members of the Republican caucus who pursue attention for attention's sake, who want clicks, who employ the strategies of reality TV. And
Madam Chair?
What's the best way? What's the best way?
That was good.
Thank you. What's the best way to get attention on a reality TV show? It's to pick a fight with someone. It's to throw wine in their face.
Right.
And I just, you know what? I refuse to let these provocateurs clout chase off of me. I refuse to let them use me for their attention. I'm going to continue to remain focused on the job in front of me. I'm going to continue to remain focused on the serious issues that this country is facing, both the ones that are created by this president and the ones that predate this president. And I'm heartened by the fact that most members of Congress, on both sides of the aisle, I'd like to see more courage from the Republicans, but most people on both sides of the aisle are serious people who want to do serious work. And those handful of attention seekers, they won't work with any Democrat. They can barely work with their own Republican colleagues.
Right.
But I continue to work with the serious people on both sides of the aisle. It's why I've been bipartisan in my approach. It's why I've been successful in pushing the administration to reverse course and restore funding for manufacturing jobs in the state. It's why Delawareans, I believe, elected me to Congress. And it's what I will continue to do so long as I have that privilege.
Oh, I take that as a promise.
Promise made. Promise kept.
Thank you so much for coming on again.
Thank you.
So we can have 7. Next time that we're on, we can say number 7. Maybe put a big 7 on the table.
Blow out the candles.
Thank you so much, Representative McBride. I appreciate you having you.
Thank you.
We're living in a moment where certainty is scarce and credibility is under attack. The markets are unstable. The institutions are wobbly, and far too many of our so-called leaders are busy performing instead of governing. But what we've heard today wasn't performance. It was purpose. Congresswoman Sarah McBride reminded us that representation alone isn't the goal. Governance is. And in a chamber increasingly driven by noise, she is still focused on substance. And let me say this clearly. Our national leaders in Washington need to stop overlooking the states. The issues playing out in our communities, our schools, our neighborhoods, those matter. And so do the voices of the constituents they were elected to serve. We are dangerously close to becoming numb to this dysfunction. We scroll through scandals in panic, we normalize chaos, and we call it politics. But this here, it isn't normal. Congress too often is now driven by the noise. Hate and segregation. Yes, I said it. Hate and segregation, coded in policy, loud in rhetoric. And no one seems to be willing to call it what it is. The weaponization of identity, the erosion of institutional independence, the economic uncertainty that is being met with silence or spin, these aren't partisan issues. They are national emergencies in slow motion. So to the viewers, stay awake and stay engaged. And remember that our future just doesn't belong to the loudest voice in the room. It belongs to the most courageous. And to those in power, the American people are watching. And more importantly, they're expecting. That's right, we are expecting it. This has been The Agenda. Be safe, be bold, and keep asking the questions that matter. We'll see you next week.